This is the Page Publishing Book Club. But you knew that, didn't you? Yeah, every time you hear this music, you know where you are and what you're listening to. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Rob Barretts is my engineer. How's it going tonight, Rob? How you feeling? You're looking good. How's your etiquette, Robbie? Do you open the door for a woman? Okay, I'm getting a yes, a nod. Do you lay your coat over a puddle so she can No, not going that far. You know what? I don't get the whole thing about wearing a hat in church. To me, that seems kind of old school, but not as far as Gwendolyn Wilson Dean is concerned. She's an elementary school teacher and educator most of her life, and she noticed what's missing in our society, and it's why she wrote her book entitled A More Perfect Way. It's a book that took her 15 years to finish, and she hopes it helps make the world a better place by teaching people how to conduct themselves appropriately. Gwendolyn.
Well, it's about charm, etiquette, civility, and social grace. All of those wonderful things that any one individual can use for the betterment of their life, the quality of their life, to just fit into society in an appropriate way, to have others feel your influence in a very positive way. But it's those rules, those norms that are utilized in a society of gentility, of the affluent, yet for the common man. These things help us all to cohabitate peacefully and appropriately.
Well, you must have seen a need for this.
Oh, yeah. Just in growing up, my mother was my inspiration. But as I have taught children, students in schools, and I have dealt with people on a day-to-day basis, and I'll tell you, the inspiration for the book has been included in the book is the compilation of a lot of the answers to questions that people have asked me over the years. And so I have saved those, and they just kept coming, and they just kept coming. And I kept rendering an opinion in answer to their questions. And so you might say this is a compilation of all of the answers to questions that people had on certain subjects.
Like what?
Things that men don't pay attention to a lot anymore, like when a woman comes to the table or enters a room, men stand. Men don't do that much anymore. Only those who are well-conditioned, well-mannered, well-reared understand the importance of that. Opening the door for a young lady when she is approaching one. When you go to a wedding, young ladies, you don't wear white unless you've been invited to. It's the color of choice of the bride. I talk about foundations, things that are not so well practiced within our societies. How to bargain shop and not come out looking like a bargain-based specialty. It runs the gamut of subjects. When you're getting ready to go to college, what is it that you do? How do you prepare? When you are filling out those applications, simple things like just be on time when you have deadlines. This is a book for life. You can take this book from the youngest of adults, youngest of persons, to age-old people who may not have received it at a younger age, but now they can still use it. So this book is appropriate for all ages. Here's one of the beauties of womanhood. And don't get me wrong, I am a women's liber. I'm all for women's rights, things of this sort. That's not really what this book is about. This is about living in such a way that these things actually happen to you. I talk about wearing hats in the book. You would be surprised the respect that comes from that. Men notice real women. And it's not because of the hat. I think it's just that all of the things that are assumed when you see certain things or certain behaviors in a woman, and men notice that. I don't have to shout it out. I don't have to stand and say, hey, I'm a woman. I don't have to do any of those things. It's just that when you are living life in a more appropriate way, that is practicing good manners, good behavior, good speech, it is very visible and it is very recognized. And without having a firm definition of, how I'm supposed to do or what I'm supposed to do, it is recognized. And so you'll see men a lot of times respond in kind to the appearance of gentility, the appearance of a real lady. In fact, I didn't even scratch the surface with the book, but I found that I needed to start putting some things out there so that people would know that, just at a very fundamental basis, it exists and they could benefit from it.
All right. Well, move over, Miss Manners. Gwendolyn Wilson-Dean is here. Thanks, Gwendolyn. Speaking of social graces, we often have preconceived notions about the people we meet, right? Based on the way they look or where they're from. LaQueen Ding confronted a lot of these misconceptions about the Chinese people and his culture while he was a student at Ohio State University. And his experience inspired him to write Track of Life. LaQueen.
It's about life about a Chinese student who had a kind of a harsh life and trying to find another way instead of following the way her parents gave to her. Kind of story mixed and myself and my friend's story. A girl, she grew up in a kind of wealthy family, but the life is not very fair to her. So she is not allowed to hire her grandparents' money because she is a girl, and in the future she will suffer from some kind of some experience in the life, and her parents will decide what kind of life she will going to take. But at last, she decided to choose her own path instead of following her parents' plan.
That's kind of difficult to do in the Chinese culture, isn't it?
Yeah. I just want to let more people know that Chinese people are not like what they think about. Like most people, when I was in high school, especially in high school, when I was in American high school, there are some people just think Chinese people are all rich, and we are all very smart because we're good at math. But that's not what the truth is. Is that Chinese people they just work a little bit harder, and they may suffer more from because the school system made us doing more math practice. That's the only reason we become good at math, but it's not because we are smart. And not all Chinese people are very rich enough to come to America for college.
That's sad that you feel that people see you that way.
Yeah, but that's not like all the people in China. They're just like a small part. So on surface, people hard to say. It's hard to see those situations. But as a person who experienced those things, and some of my friends had a similar experience, so I just want to make them to a story, and maybe let more American people know what kind of life some Chinese people are having. I just kind of some friends told my stories, and my story is kind of similar to them, or had some kind of experience can connect with each other, so make each other feel better. So there's someone similar to them, right. And that's the reason I just put our story on this book. That's the way I write this book.
Well, thank you, LaQuinn. I hope all those students that you went to school with read your book. Jerry Setzer wrote Seasons of My Life's Journey after an experience with a family member that left a real impact on his life. Explain that experience, Jerry.
I have a brother that I never knew till he was 50 years old, and he was really excited about it because he didn't grow up with us and know more about his siblings. It was really exciting to him. In fact, I gave him the first copy. So that's what it started out. It started out just primarily for siblings, grandkids, great-grandkids, and I've got a lot of people locally here that's been interested in it, so I sold a few here locally, and basically that's it.
Why did you not know your brother until a few years ago?
Well, there was 5 of us kids, and my mom and dad decided to put him up for adoption when he was, I think, 3 days old in the hospital. So we grew up without him, and his family we found his birth certificate and had our last name on his birth certificate. And he was adopted by another family, of course, and he began to search for his blood family, and his daughter made the connection with us. And before our mother passed away, I had an opportunity, and she had an opportunity to meet him and see him and his family. And I believe primarily my focus has been on a spiritual life change in my life that occurred back on March the 28th, 1980, when I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior. My life turned around and went a different direction at that point. I began to see that there is more to life than just obtaining material things, that there is a spiritual side that we need to be aware of, and not only be aware of, but be, I guess, stirred to the point of wanting to know more about the Bible and what the Bible says that pertains to not only life in this life, but also the life beyond this. And so that's been my focus now since 1980. I remember years ago standing out in my front yard at night and just lifting my hands up to the sky, and I just began to ask, I said, what is this all about? You know, there has to be more to life than eating, sleeping, and working, and that's what I was doing back then. And I began to realize, and I began to search, and I found the answer. And the answer is making a decision to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior. And the last half of my book, that's the focus. And it goes back to what it says in Ecclesiastes. It says that to everything, there's a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. There's a season and a time. And I've seen this in people's lives where they get into a season and they stay in that season their entire life. And I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong, but many times those seasons come to an end that many people don't recognize when it comes to an end, because God's got something greater. And if we step out of that old season and step into the new season, then we're going to be moving up, and rather than just kind of staying on a plateau. And so basically that was the title. That's how the title came about, Seasons of My Life's Journey.
All right, Jerry, thanks so much. Rena Wynn Shalisky worked in an office job for most of her life, but one of her many creative outlets was always writing. And finally now, she's published her first novel, an historical fiction book called My Angel. Rena.
It concerns two women, and it opens with the birth of a young child in Italy, pre-World War II, 1929. And it actually covers her growth up and becoming a woman. And the other story involves a young woman in the Midwest, starting with her teen years and continuing through her young womanhood. The girl in Italy becomes a war bride of an American black soldier, and the other young woman becomes a nurse. And it covers their two lives through the ups and downs, through the wars that occur during that period, which means Korea, Vietnam, etc. Their lives are totally separate and only intersect at one particular point for one very brief moment. And that is basically what the book is about, that one brief moment that it leads into. And this was written 35 years ago, by the way. I grew up in the Bronx, and I lived in an area with mostly private homes. And one day, an old man came knocking at our door, and he was looking for his daughter. He had an old envelope crumpled up with an address that was on the block, but nobody knew her. Nobody knew who she was. We sent him over to an Italian neighbor who spoke Italian because his English was broken English, and they couldn't help him. And he landed up just going on his way, not having any satisfaction. And it always occurred to me, like, why was he looking for his daughter? What could have separated them? That all he had left of her was an old envelope. It just seemed sad, and it seemed odd, and it stuck with me. And that inspired the novel. I mean, he never told us the story. The story is totally fiction, but it was my creation of an explanation for why he was doing what he was doing.
Interesting. You wrote it 35 years ago. Why did you want to publish it now?
Because I had tried 35 years ago. It took me 3 years to write. It took 3 years of research at the time. Because all my historical data is accurate. At any rate, I had attempted to have it published, and I got sort of disheartened at rejection slips, which isn't unusual, and decided it was time to move on. All my life, I've always required some sort of creative outlet, which I have gotten over the past several years of my life in jewelry making. I also paint, so I had my creative outlet and felt it was time to put away the book, enough of the disappointment. And I turned 70 last year and decided it was time to give myself a birthday present and try again. And I did. It's been very exciting. It's been very crazy and a little scary, but I was glad I did it. For me, it was a very long process because I do a lot of research. Also, I write longhand. I don't like doing something at a keyboard.
Oh, geez.
It was difficult.
That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work.
It was a lot of work. And considering that I still will not sit down at a computer keyboard to create anything,
Oh, geez,
I
that's
probably
crazy.
would have to do this all over again with things.
All right, well, good luck with that. That's all I can tell you. All right, we have got to take a very short break. Do not go anywhere. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you. Printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
Hey, thanks for coming back to the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Pat Gooley is a retired Navy officer. He's done a lot of things in his life, but publishing his first book was a whole new ballgame. Mystic Arena is the name of his book. It's about a priest with supernatural powers who's on a mission to stop a terrorist plot and avenge the murder of his best friend. Pat, tell me more.
It's about a missionary in Africa who discovers that he has the ability to some of them call it far-see. He can see things in other places in the world as they're happening. And sometimes he can interact with what he's seeing. He tells the bishop and talks to the archbishop. And needless to say, he gets sent off to Rome to be evaluated. So they keep him up in Rome to sort of keep him under control. And as a separate item, there's a terrorist group in Africa that's training people to perform acts of terror in various countries around the world. And in the course of the book, he gets crosswise with one of the terrorists, and they wind up having a confrontation that leads to the conclusion, shall we say. I guess that's a real short summary. I had heard about far-seeing on a couple of the late-night radio shows and never thought much about it. I had a dream. This is crazy. Guy wanted to watch, we'll say the Super Bowl, I forget, some big event, and he didn't have a television, and all of a sudden a flat screen appears on the wall of his house.
No.
How that developed into the rest of the book, I can't tell you.
And that's what inspired you to do the rest of this?
That was part of it. Some of it also drew on my own experience. The main character grew up in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon, so did I. I spent 2 years in a minor seminary in Oregon and California, left and went to Notre Dame and then the Naval Academy. He went to seminary in Oregon and then went off to Notre Dame. So, there's a little bit from my personal experience that I mixed in there.
Okay. Are you going to keep writing, or is this one and done?
Well, I'm working on an outline for a sequel to this one. I've got about 8,000 words so far, but I've got to piece together a lot there. And I've got another totally unrelated novel in the works that I've been on and off again for about 10 years.
So you think you're going to get that one together as well?
Maybe.
All right. But this is a standalone novel
So far.
that was basically inspired when this flat screen TV appeared on this guy's wall.
In part, yeah. It was interesting, and the actual publication process was very educational as well.
How so?
Well, I didn't realize all the details that go into. I was familiar with editing from being a technical writer for a number of years, but the whole process of artwork and page layout and design never really came up as a big issue before.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of work. It makes you realize why you didn't do it by yourself. You definitely need the help and the guidance. I could never do it by myself. It's crazy.
Absolutely. The folks at Page have been real good to me with this.
Well, that's really good to hear, Pat. Thank you for that. John Bouchard has written 22 books, and today we're talking about Shaving Sasquatch. It's about a Boy Scout who discovers Northern California in a very unconventional way, smelling an unconventional smell. Right, John?
Basically, it's a book that has to do with my own personal experiences. I was a Boy Scout when I was a young man back in the 60s. We went on a camp out every month. And a big 2-week camp out during the summer. And although I have never seen a Sasquatch, I've certainly heard the most unusual noises, felt the presence and the stench of something unbelievable. It wasn't a skunk. And I felt like I was being followed. It's about a young man who they're going on a preparatory camp out or hike for their 50-mile camp out, where they, it's kind of it's an award type. Where they go for a scout troop will go for a hike that covers 50 miles during their camp out, and they all get a patch. But you can't just go on a 50-mile hike. You have to get somewhat conditioned for it, because you have to take all food, your bedding, extra clothes, utensils. There's several things that are recommended you take. So your packs are usually around 50 to 60 pounds, and almost as much as a little Boy Scout weighs.
Okay, and so is Sasquatch, you never saw it, but you smelled it.
Well, yeah, and I've heard a noise made by a very large animal. I never heard it before or since. I'm not even quite sure how to describe it, but it was sounded like a combination of a moose, an elk, a bear, and a cow. And whatever made it was huge, and it was following me. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and that's when I smelled that outrageous, unbelievable stench. But this is something actually I formulated in my mind back when I was a Boy Scout. And, I used to tell my children at night. They'd come home and say, Dad, tell us a story. I was a carpenter. I didn't have a lot of income, so I couldn't afford to buy I had quite a few kids. I couldn't give them that. Everybody had the Nintendos and whatever. We didn't have that. I'd tell them the stories. They loved it. And as I got older, they wanted to tell their children. So I said, Grandpa, please, tell us. I couldn't be there, so I started writing them down. This is an insistence on my children and my wife. They demanded that I do this. I have a son who is a website builder, very successful at it. He's helping me now to build a website, and so we can do a weekly blog. And these guys are so creative, and that will be very helpful. I've got some amazing friends, too, on Facebook that are kind of in that industry and are doing critiques for it. And so far, I'm very well pleased. Everybody's happy with them, and so am I.
Great. It helps to have somebody in the family who can do a little blog for you.
Yeah.
That always helps.
I must tell you that I didn't start out writing books, the idea of ever having anything published. That wasn't the idea. But here we are.
Yeah.
And I'm going to continue. I'm not going to quit now, because it's a compulsion that I've had for 40 years, and I should have done it 40 years ago rather than wait, the last few years to do it.
Better late than never, John. Thanks so much. Finally, Molly Finley McIntyre found herself homeless in Austin, Texas for just under a year. But if there was one positive thing to come out of her experience, it was that it brought her back to her love of writing. The name of her book is A Book of Semi-Homeless Poetry and Writings. Molly, tell us what happened.
Well, I was a substitute teacher, and the school districts around there called you a lot. So, I got to work a lot. And then it slowed down, and I just couldn't pay my bills anymore. So I had to give up my apartment.
Where did you go?
Well, I went to Salvation Army at first, and then I ended up just on the streets.
At what point did you decide you had to write this all down and get it published?
Well, I wrote a book following this one that I'm going to submit pretty soon. It's all about it. It's called From the Streets. And I actually was writing it when I was homeless. I had spiral notebooks that I was just writing it all the time about what was going on and everything.
I would think people would be curious. Curious because
Yeah.
most people look at homeless people and go, oh, it's your choice. You don't have to live like that.
That's not true. It's not true. When you get homeless, it really does happen to you.
Do you have any family?
I do. I have 3 sisters. That's all that's left. My brothers have passed away and my parents have passed away.
And none of them wanted to help you?
I tried, but none of them would let me live with them.
That's rough.
I know.
So are your poems hopeful or?
They are hopeful. I was homeless for less than a year, for about a year. And there are 4 chapters in the book. And the 3rd chapter is about being homeless. And 1st, 2nd, and 4th are about, love and life and faith.
You've managed to pull yourself out. That's great.
Yeah.
I guess that's where the faith comes in, right?
Yes, definitely.
What do you do now?
Actually, I'm on Social Security retirement now, and ended up being able to, get a trailer, and now I'm in an apartment. I've been in here over 2 years.
Well, Molly, good luck on your book. I hope it all works out for you.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Molly. And thanks to all of our authors who joined us tonight. Most of all, thank you for listening. We really do appreciate that. Rob, we got to go now. Our time is up, but we will be back next week. Same time, same place with a whole new lineup of first time and a long time authors. You come back or download us anytime you want at 710wor.iheart.com. Have a great weekend.